Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read 2 stories from r/Library of Shadows. The stories in this video may be disturbing to certain viewers. Discretion is advised. Let's begin. Our first story is from Pen of Black. Devin was supposed to be here. Devin was supposed to be here. He stared forward, with all of the acceptance of a middle-aged man standing in line at the DMV. Monotonous acceptance dulled his eyes. He took in a long breath, and the harsh stench of chlorine almost threatened to burn his nose. The tightness of the bright orange arm floaties uncomfortably tucked right below his shoulders, and the cold air chilling his skin told him all he needed to know. He was 9 again, and he was at the pool. A small indoor community pool that his mother had often taken him to when the summers made their modest apartment almost too sticky to bear. He had loved it there. Wasting countless summers pruning in that stringent water was the happiest memories of Devin's life. Wading in the water, the overcooled air blowing across the room from a freshly recharged air conditioner, chilling his wet skin. He would often stare out of the windows into the sky and imagine that he was in a warm hot spring on a cold snowy day in the middle of nowhere. His own secret place, where a moment could feel like a lifetime. And now, he was back, standing at the edge of the faded blue tile, his little feet teetering off the smooth, cool edge. His toes wiggled gleefully, happy to greet the old tile beneath them again. But there were no sounds of splashing water, no kids screaming Marco, their hands outstretched blindly searching. No parents chatting with each other about how their work had been. No lifeguard whistles punctuating an order of no running. In fact, there was scantly any sound at all. The only thing Devin could make out was an almost inaudible soft sucking noise, like a clogged pipe trying to clear itself. Or maybe... Devin looked down, and beyond his 9-year-old toes and the crest of the smooth edge of the faded blue tile, there was only black. The community pool that Devin had spent his childhood years in was now completely filled with an impossibly thick black ooze, almost to the point of appearing as congealed, undressed coffee. But Devin knew better. The soft sucking noises were coming from it, and it seemed to move, to undulate, imitating the way that bodies of water do, the way his pool did. He looked up, undaunted, and turned his head back towards where the entrance of the community pool should have been. But it wasn't there. In fact, all 4 walls were totally immaculate. They stood adamant, and didn't concede form to allow for the windows that Devin had stared out of as a kid, floating in what used to be clear, if not significantly dingy waters. It didn't concede form to the old blue metal doors with wide metal handles that his mother had endlessly scolded him about hanging off of. Trying to hoist himself up and see through the small glass windows just out of reach for his small frame. No. These walls had never held windows, nor doors. They stood as they always had, always will, unrelenting to the whims of passage. They were unblemished and untouched, not by cheering children huddled, counting down for games of hide-and-seek like he had, or from lifeguards who might lean against them while vigilant on their shift. nor from concerned parents attempting to maintain their balance. Devin understood all of this, and possibly, the moment he was aware he was here at all. Devin was at the pool again, and he was supposed to be here. He smiled in acceptance and insanity, and reaching up, pinched his nose the way he used to before he was jaded by adulthood, by the thousand sorrows that come with life and growing up, and took a step, the last step. Surprisingly, he sunk into it as easily as water, but it wasn't water. It was hot and oily, like clothes drenched in sweat after a hot day in the sun. The ooze seemed to give way for him, and yet pile on top of him all of the same. He instinctually attempted to raise his arms, to push against the fluid, but it didn't make a difference. The ooze was so heavy it pushed itself against everything. He felt it push into his ears. He could feel it against his face, pushing into the sides of his eyes, up his nose, pushing into every orifice he had. It was moving with purpose, trying to force its way in. Burned his eyes, and as he clenched them harder, he could feel his eyeballs stick to his eyelids, now glazed over with the black ooze. It felt like rust creeping down his throat, suffocatingly thick. He wasn't able to bring it up, and every time he would open his mouth, more of it pushed its way in. He continued to sink down, much deeper than the community pool could have ever been. Moments seemed to stretch on forever. The worst of it was the symphony of screams. Deep down in the black, he heard screams. Not the soft weighted gurgling that you would expect, but full-bodied screams of terror. Begging for help, pleading for their lives. Shrill and harsh, they almost drowned everything else out. Almost. A deep whisper came to him, floating impossibly miserable on the ooze, in the ooze, from the ooze. But above all, the screams were just the same. Hell isn't fire and bright. No. It's an expanse of thick black, warm corrosive liquid. It hissed, begrudgingly amused. It's like tar in a way. It sticks to you, never wanting to let go. It knows you, welcomes you. It clings and stains. It weighs down with weight of sorrow and embraces you in a way that nothing ever could. The black glassy ocean and desolate, even though it's filled with occupants. They aren't people anymore. Devin was in the black ocean, and he was supposed to be here. His cries would soon join the chorus. Our last story is from DanielAdamsHorror. 3 Taps. It was the nights that Sarah couldn't sleep that she knew he would come. Since she was a little girl, his form had changed, but the visits hadn't. The visits were all the same and all their own. Slithering into the room, he would come to reclaim what was Sarah's, but what he saw as his. Light from the half-moon filtered in through the open blinds. It washed the space in blue and shadows stretched along the wall. She laid awake, head propped up on the pillows with her eyes fixated on the closed bathroom door. Sarah waited desperately for the pill to start working, but she had been at this too long. If it hadn't worked by now, it never would. Not tonight, at least. All she could do was wait for his visit. A soft thud outside the door into the hall. Footstep. Sarah held her breath, straining to try and hear another, but it never came. Only silence of the house. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign that that noise had come from another place. She found none. Nothing moved inside the room. Her lungs burned, screaming at her to let go. As she exhaled, she heard another thud. Sarah closed her eyes tight. Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep, she thought to herself. If she shut her eyes long enough, sleep was bound to come. Right. That was the desperation taking over. Sleep wouldn't arrive. She had been at this too long, knew the pattern of her body rejecting the medicine. Sarah knew she would have to open her eyes at some point. When she did, he would be there, standing over her, relishing the moment that she saw him. For him, half of it was the fear. It always was. For years, nights like this had come to Sarah. The inability to fall asleep, the paralysis, and finally, him. Her and her mother had tried everything to get them to stop. Hypnosis, sleep aid, medical tests, drugs, therapy, all were given their fair chance. They were a dark tunnel for Sarah to travel through, only to finally see the light and him at the end. Waiting. Smiling. Keeping her eyes shut, Sarah tried to reason with herself. I haven't seen him in so long. This visit will be over quick. Tomorrow night the meds will work and I won't see him again for a long time. The meds will work tomorrow. The back of her mind, a voice told her that she was telling herself a lie. But was that her voice? Or his? What if the new medicine stopped working? It asked. Will he come every night? He could pick me up and take me away. Would it be so bad? She knew that those weren't her thoughts, but his. Now he invaded her thoughts like he invaded her room, her space so many times. As time went on, would he grow stronger? And she, weaker? No, Sarah told herself, this time confident his thought was her own. He won't enter my mind. This is me, and in this domain, I rule. I'll open my eyes, take it back. Slowly, Sarah opened her eyes. Nothing in the room. No dark shapes, no strange smells. Sarah was alone. She allowed herself to breathe. Maybe he wouldn't come tonight. Maybe it was over. Had it all finally worked? The therapy? The treatments? Could it really be over? 3 taps came from the other side of the door, and Sarah felt her heart sink into her stomach. It would never be over. On these sleepless nights, when Sarah laid awake and the moon shined through, he would always be there, waiting outside the door. The knob never turned, but the door opened slow. Sarah wished she had something to grab, to hurl at him with all of her might. Something that could change this encounter from the rest. Maybe even break the cycle. It would do no good, even if there was something to throw. She was paralyzed, either from the fear or the medicine or something else. Something he emanated, like a toxic gas from his pores that would herald his arrival. All the young women tormented by him felt this, perhaps. The reason he was so long in visiting Sarah, he was elsewhere in the world, with the sleepless women. Half in the room and half in the hall, he stood in the doorframe, the blue light casting through, allowing Sarah to just make out his shape. Long, pointed fleshy fingers rubbed his gut. He stepped into the room and flashed Sarah a smile. A forked tongue broke out behind his perfect white teeth, and he licked his lips. Another step in, and Sarah felt her body begin to shake. This was always the worst part, the part before, the part where he stared. His eyes never left hers as he slowly dropped to all fours and crawled towards the bed. She couldn't see much of him, just the dim light reflecting off of his balding head, the hair on the sides draping over pointed ears. As he crawled to the foot of the bed, no sound was made. Sarah couldn't even hear herself breathing. If she could just stop her breath and then her heart, surely that would end this. Sarah felt the blankets move as he slipped his hand underneath and wrapped those awful fingers around her ankle. She wished that her body would just let her scream. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting and sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read and slightly altered with the author's permissions. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.